Hi, I'm Sarah Davis. I'm from Big Society Capital. I'm a talent specialist here at Big Society Capital. And what I want to do is to talk just through some of the key skills that are involved in mentoring, and also introduce you to a key process which is called GROW. In terms of what is mentoring, I think that's already been covered in the introductory part of this session, and because it's very much about looking at mentoring in this context in terms of the Get Informed campaign. So that's already been covered. So the first part of my session is really going to be talking about what the key skills are that you will need to be using. And for a lot of people, this will be very much a refresher. The key skills that you would use for mentoring would be the key skills that you would use in a coaching kind of conversation, or even in some kind of line management interaction. And the things that we think are most important are listening and questioning. And listening being particularly important. And the reason that listening is so powerful in this context is because this is very much about really trying to understand what the important issues are for the people that you're mentoring, so the people from the charity boards that you're working with. And listening and being engaged with them is a key part of that process. So this is about genuinely listening and genuinely being in that moment with them so that you can understand what the key issues are for them. Quite often we talk about listening and it's a kind of a going through the motions, whereas this is very important because it makes them, listening well will help the other person to feel valued. It will help them to feel engaged. It will help them to think more about what they need to think about, and it will help them to really keep their train of thought. So it's a very, very powerful part of this process. And a skill that probably most of you already have, but sometimes we can forget. And I think when we're very busy in our kind of day jobs, it can be quite easy to go into a meeting with somebody and just suddenly find that you're actually not listening to what they're saying. So in order to really establish these relationships, because relationship is a very important part of this, listening well is going to be an important part of that. So just a bit about listening. I'm talking about active listening, and the words active listening are about showing that you're listening. So this isn't about pretending that you're listening and doing stuff to look as if you are. This is about genuinely listening, but showing the other person that you're listening. And by showing them that you're listening, you're giving them that sense of them being valued, them being interested, you being engaged with them, and they will then far more readily see you as their not trusted advisor exactly in this context, but they're the trusted person that they can turn to talk to about their situation with. So the kind of words that you would use if you were showing that you're listening would be recapping what the person's saying. So what you're saying is, so let me just check that I understand what you've said, or even reflecting back on emotions. So quite often what we do is we reflect back in terms of the content of what somebody has said, but we don't reflect back what they're actually showing in terms of emotions. So you might say, you sound angry about that, or you sound really excited about that, or you might say, you sound very upbeat about what's happening to you right now, or you sound very worried. So actually reflecting those things back can be really helpful for people because it can help them to think, actually, you're right, yes, I do, and I hadn't realized I did. And that realization can then be very helpful as part of the opening up process. The music, which is the word that I use to describe tone of voice, is about being encouraging. So it's about being warm and matching. So if you summarize in a way that is actually over assertive, it sounds like you're putting your own view across. When you're summarizing in a warm and matching and an encouraging way, it's very much showing that you're actually reflecting what that person has said. The dance part of this is the body language. So when you're actively listening, it's about being actively and clearly engaged from a body language perspective, and that's about open body language. It's about eye contact. Now, it may be that you will have some of your meetings, it's possible you may have some of your meetings remotely, so you could be talking to them over the phone or via Skype. In which case eye contact is not going to be so possible. I mean, eye contact via Skype is possible depending on the connection, but eye contact over the phone obviously isn't. So if you aren't actually with the person and you're dealing with them remotely, then it's even more important to do the kind of verbal bits of active listening, which is the reflecting back, the summarizing, etc. So the sorts of things that you would do if you were really showing to somebody that you were actively listening to them, and the sorts of things to really bring into your conversations when you're working with your mentees is here now. Silence is important. You're getting people to think, and you're getting people to think about exploring different ideas for doing things, and people need time to think. And sometimes if we're in a bit of a rush or we're a bit nervous, we tend to fill the gaps ourselves. So it's really important to explore stuff and reflect and experience different things and then let it sit. And so your mentee might be somebody who actually just likes to just think about things for a minute. And if you're asking them difficult questions or you're challenging them in different ways, they'll need to think about that. And so silence will be important. So don't be afraid of silences in these conversations. It's really about getting people to be creative in terms of about the options that they think that they'd like to explore. Obviously, social investment being one of those options. Encouragers are those kind of noises or nods that you might be doing or making to get the person to speak more. So you'll deal with all sorts of different people. Some will be very happy to have the conversation. Some might be more reluctant. Some might be nervous of it. Some might be naturally shy. There could be a whole range of different personality types. So you're going to be needing to encourage them to open up to you and to explore the options with you. Paraphrasing, which is about showing you understand. And I think particularly because you're working with them in their world and you want to understand their world so that you can help them in terms of what options they've got available to them, then actually really being able to show that you understand it and you've heard what they've said by paraphrasing is an important part of that. And so nobody likes people coming in from sort of a different sector to try and advise. They will always be much more receptive to you if you show that you've listened, that you understand what's important to them. So if you don't understand stuff, clarify. And pulling themes and threads together can be really helpful because that can help you to make sense of what they've said, and it can help you to help them to make sense of what they've said. And that then might lead them in a different direction to the one that they thought they were going to actually think about earlier. And this is all about exploring. It's all about exploring options. And summarizing is part of that at the end. So active listening is a core part of being a mentor, and it's extremely important in the context of the Get Informed campaign because it's all about relationship building. It's all about showing that you understand, and it's all about you understanding so that you can help them with exploring the options in terms of social investment, potentially being one of those options. The other skill that you'll use a fair bit will be questioning. Again, all of this stuff is probably very familiar to a lot of you, but questioning, which is about really trying to understand. And we use the analogy between an explorer rather than a tourist. So the tourist is the person who, when they meet somebody who's been on holiday, they like to ask them all the questions about their holiday in order that they get the chance at some point to tell them about their own holiday. And so it's not a genuine interest necessarily. It's not a genuine interest exactly. It's a desire to transmit rather than to explore. Whereas exploring is very much about actually, I really want to find out. I've got no agenda of my own. I want to find out. And this is what questioning is here in this context. So you'll be using words like, tell me about, what happened then? Which of these is the most important to do? How did you feel? So it's very much open questions, which are getting them to think more about what's going on for them and what the possible angle might be for the future. Again, in terms of the tone of voice, it's which I'm going to call the music here, as I said before, is encouraging, it's warm, it's soft, and the dance is the body language, as I said. And again, it's similar to listening. It's about having good eye contact, and it's about matching. And if you watch people who are working one-to-one in the way that you'll be working one-to-one with people, you'll quite often see that their body language is matching. They're mirroring each other because they're reflecting what's happening for each other. So moving on to the process that we're recommending, which is a good process in any kind of coaching or kind of mentoring kind of relationship, is GROW. And GROW is looking at goals, reality, options, and will. And this actually links quite well as well to the organizational and individual change equation. So the change equation is written below. D stands for dissatisfaction. times V for vision, times F for first steps, needs to be greater than R for resistance. What that means is that dissatisfaction with the present situation, combined with a vision of the future, combined with clear first steps, needs to be greater than any resistance that you might encounter. And this is useful for looking at any kind of organizational change or individual change, what we're looking at in both contexts this time, in this context. So it's about actually the fact that what you're trying to do is explore with them an option for using social investment as a way of raising funds, rather than some of the options that perhaps they've explored in the past. And so actually what we are trying to do here with this is to inform people so that they will change, and they'll think about exploring change as part of that. So that's why GROW is really relevant in this context. So just to say a little bit more about how GROW works, it is a kind of a process in terms of the kind of questions that you might like to ask. It's fluid, so you might need to move between them. But one of the things I think early on in your conversation with your mentee will be about sort of establishing what you're there to do and what you're not there to do. So you're there to help them to explore ways of raising revenue, ways of getting more funds into their organization. And what you bring to that is you bring some experience and ability as a mentor and a coach, and you also bring some expertise as a person who knows about social investment. You're not there to advise them on social investment. You're there to help them to be informed, so they might choose to do that as an option in the future, whereas perhaps before they wouldn't have. So it's really helpful for you to know or to work with them to understand what their goals are, what are they trying to achieve longer term for the organisation. So they're on the board of that charity, and what are they trying to achieve for that charity. So what are they trying to achieve? When do they want to achieve it by? What will success look like? How will they measure that success? And how will they know when they're halfway there towards that success? Those are the kind of questions that you might like to ask. They're absolutely not, we're not saying you have to ask those questions, but we would recommend that you start with goal. And the reason for starting with goal is that if you can look at something in the broader frame, it's much easier then to help people to explore options. So if you can actually get to understand what are they trying to achieve, what are they trying to achieve for that charity or that social enterprise, what are they trying to do, and then you can help them with the next part of the process. The other thing about starting with goal is it's aspirational and it feels really positive, whereas sometimes if you start with reality, you get very much into the morass of kind of what's going on and what's going wrong now. So the next stage of GROW is reality, and that's about you working with the individual to really understand what's happening now, and that might be what they're doing currently to raise funds, what's happening, what are their concerns, who's affected by what's happening in the charity right now, what's the main issues. It's all about anything that they want to share from their perspective as a board member as to what's going on in that particular organisation. So what is their current reality, what are they trying to move from and to. And it gives you a good sense and helps them to have a better sense themselves in terms of what have they got in terms of resources and so on. So what are their options on that front? And then you do go into options. And this is about actually helping them to explore the range of options that they have available. And this will be about revenue generation in some shape or form, probably. And so there might be all sorts of different things that they might be choosing to do. And our suggestion is that this is probably the point where offering them some real good information about social investment as an option would be the best place to put it, because you're here doing this, you volunteered to be a mentor on the Get Informed scheme, and you are somebody with good knowledge of social investment, and we're trying to get people to be better informed on that. So this is the place where you would contribute that information. So you're not guiding them in any particular direction, but you are presenting the information so they can make decisions based on good information. And this is the place where you'd start to talk about that, and more widely about other propositions as well. And it may be that they don't decide to go with it, but what we're trying to do is to help them to be better informed. So when there's a better time to use social investment as a proposition, they might choose to do it. This isn't about getting them to buy up to it right now. This is about helping them to be better informed. This is what the campaign is all about. And then the final part of GROW is will, and will is about action. So it's all very well people having a clear goal and then being really clear about what's happening now and exploring the options which are available to them. This is about how committed are they to a change. And that might be, they might have chosen a different option, a different way of raising funds, in which case then you can work with them to look at what their commitment is to that. Or they might have chosen to pursue social investment as an option, or they might have chosen to pursue knowing more about social investment as an option. It could be any of those things, but this is about actually trying to get them to commit to something. And that might be a commitment to finding out more information. It might be a commitment to signing up for something. It might be a whole range of different. They won't be signing up to anything in this particular meeting, but this is about what their commitment is to action of some sort. So the last question on here, which is the how committed are you out of 10 to taking the first steps, is a really important one. So you will have talked about, we have talked about whether the people who've signed up to be mentees on this scheme, their readiness level, but this will be about actually checking what they're like in terms of commitment to moving forward. So they will have expressed interest in being part of the scheme and being interested in knowing more about social investment. So they're already interested, and this then gives us a greater gauge in terms of how committed are they to any further action on any of the things that they've explored. Because it's all very well exploring goal, reality and options, but ultimately it's about some kind of action, even if it's just an action to know more, and that's absolutely fine. And that's where we'd finish on the GROW model. And again, as I said before, it's a model that you can use to help guide your process. It's not set in stone. The questions are absolutely not set in stone. They're just suggestions. And what you might like to do before you start to have your first meetings with your mentees is try and think about the kind of questions that you'd like to ask. Remembering that it's all about getting them to kind of look at different alternatives with your guidance and your help. And it's not about you giving people solutions, even though you are giving them some of your expertise about this sector. And I think that's it. So thank you so much for listening to me. And I wish you lots and lots of luck with this.